Welcome to my review of the S7 car head-up display. This is one of the newer models around and it has a couple of interesting extra features, one of which is the larger screen. Here's just a quick overview of the included items. On the back of the box it gives you an idea of some of the features included in this model. Take note you have two specific display modes. One's OBD, the diagnostics, and the other one is a GPS mode. Now you do get a reflective panel included and you can attach this to the windscreen. Personally I find it a bit reflective, particularly from outside the car, so I don't use it and I think the display works fine without it. Now you attach this using water and you sort of spread it out to get a clean finish onto the windscreen. There's also included a couple of pads here for cleaning the area and a sort of dust adhesive strip. Onto the main unit you'll see the icons laid out across the bottom. They are fault codes and you can actually clear fault codes with this unit too. The rest of the digits and displays are here in a reversed form. On the side we have a switch to go between the OBD and GPS, and there's a rocker here which can be pushed in for the menu settings. On the underside we have a mini USB port. On the back it has a bit of a texture which will give it some more grip with the non-slip pad which is included. Now this is the cable which you run from the OBD, which powers it too. It's about 1.2 meters long and it's a flat type, so it's reasonably easy to move it around the car and not get in the way. This is the sticky pad. These can normally be washed. It's not actually adhesive as such, but it grips quite firmly onto the dash and onto the unit too. Now the manual that's included is workable, is the best way to describe it. The displays and icons are reasonably clear, but the English is actually slightly poor, so you might have to do a bit of work going through this. Now it is usable, but it could be better laid out, to be honest with you. But you will definitely need this because some of the settings are just using numbers and you'll need to know how to change the specifics for them. Now this is just me booting it up. This is at night inside the car, and I'm taking this from just behind the driver's wheel. Now you'll see the display come up here. This is the OBD mode, so it's taking the information directly from the ECU. Now if you move the rocker switch up and down, you'll be able to change the left and right displays to what you want. You have fuel consumption, you can change to the time that you've been driving, the voltage, water temperature. It's fairly customizable. You can actually run through different settings on this and get it how you particularly want. If you need to go into the menus, you need to long press and then go through, push in again to cycle through the options. They're all listed out in the manual, so you really do need to look at that. Now it can be a little bit confusing. It's not too bad once you have the manual with you. If you don't have the manual, most of the settings you won't really be able to adjust. I'll move the camera behind the wheel. The reason I positioned the unit here is because I don't see the display at the bottom, I just see it on the windscreen, so I put it in the console behind the steering wheel. I found that to be the best position. You can move it to the side a bit as well, but this worked for me so I didn't get that distraction. Now looking at it from the outside, this is at a higher angle, so you will see some lights coming up, but at a driver's point of view oncoming, it's not going to distract them. Quick sample now, daylight driving. It's actually pretty clear. There you'll notice some strange artifacts with the numerals with the dash camera that I'm using. It's because it's got a HDR mode and the frame rate that it takes it at will vary. It's at a higher frame rate than the actual display can output at, but you don't see this normally. It's actually fairly clear in the daytime. This is me making some adjustments to the unit. Obviously if you're going to play around with this, pull the car over. You don't want to be cycling through options and menus when you're driving the vehicle. That would be quite unsafe to do that. But one of the points that I did note with this is the rev indicator. You can see here I'm revving the engine. It kind of works in reverse, as in the bars go down at higher revs rather than up with the revs, which is slightly strange. Perhaps they've done that for a reason. You have a few modes on this where you can limit the display so that at higher speeds it will just show you a couple of items and it will blank out a lot of the other information, or you can leave it on automatic. I don't find it distracting at all once you have it set up how you want. The information that's provided can be quite useful, particularly the water temperature. And although I wouldn't use the revs much, the fuel consumption is a bit hit and miss. You really have to go into the settings to get that adjusted. I found that could be quite tricky, and that's where the manual didn't really help me much. I've been switching between kilometers and miles per hour. There's no miles per gallon on this, so it's liters. Supposedly 100 kilometers or liters per hour. I found it difficult to set up the actual fuel consumption, and I couldn't really get a direct fuel consumption reading off of it. Not sure why that is. It should be pulling that off the ECU, or perhaps I'm not doing something right. So in most ways it worked pretty well for me, apart from with the fuel consumption. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I'll have to go through the manual again, but the other functions actually work quite well. It really depends on what you want to use. I've got it in the GPS mode. That's much more fire and forget. All you have to do is change the time zone. That will give you an accurate reading on the speed. You won't get as much information because it's not running off the OBD, the ECU unit on the car. But it's still quite useful. You can have the time displayed as well. It also shows you the GPS lock-on with the icons along the dial. I like the display. It actually looks pretty good. The only thing that I didn't really like was the fact that you have to tweak around a bit. Like the revs per minute wasn't accurate, so I had to move that down, though the speed was. So I'm not really sure why that is. I'm not a mechanic. But perhaps there's a reason why that might be. I tried it in a couple of vehicles. Right, so final score for me, like the display and lots of customization once you get used to actually fiddling with those settings, and the two modes are actually quite useful. So you can cycle between those two. What I didn't like was the user manual could have been much better. I thought it could have been more clearly laid out and easier to sort of work through. And some of the settings did need to be adjusted, perhaps more than I would have expected, and a couple of little bugs in there as well, I think. So it's a fairly good unit, but room for a little bit of improvement too.